Hey all, Ian Higton from Eurogamer here, and I've just spent the last 8 hours or so using a tourism mod to gallop around Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree DLC in order to locate and schnaffle up all 50 available Scadutree Fragments for this here tips video. While a lot of these fragments are in fairly easy to reach places along the questline path, like the ones next to Mikla's crosses, there are a fair few that are out of the way and hard to reach optional areas. But if you want some extra help beating the legacy dungeon bosses, it's imperative that you find as many of these as possible, as they permanently increase the damage that you deal, whilst also decrease the damage that you take. So in the following video, I'll be showing off where you can find all 50 fragments in the DLC, starting with the most easy to reach before going on to the more difficult ones to find. So do beware of boss and location spoilers within. Oh, and by the way, just as I was finishing editing this video, I found out that allegedly Scadutree is actually meant to be pronounced Shadow Tree, but there is absolutely no way I'm going back and redoing this voiceover and edit. No, I just recorded this bit like literally before I put the video on YouTube because, well, it's late. I'm tired. Okay, the first bunch of Scadutree Fragments can be found in Gravesite Plain, starting with this nice easy duo in the Church of Consolation. You can get here by heading due east from the cave that you initially emerge from once you start the DLC. So quickly activate the Gravesite Plain Site of Grace in front of you and then head east until you hit a road. Then follow it down and around until you reach the church, which holds your prize, and also an angry knight. Sorry. Once you've grabbed those, start heading back up north, but once you've passed the cliff edge, head to the east and then hug the big wall at the side until you reach this collection of graves just northeast of the Scorched Ruins. Here you'll find a pot shadow enemy, which, when killed, will drop your next Scadutree Fragment. This next fragment is in plain sight, right next to the first of Mikla's crosses and the 3-path cross Site of Grace. It's super simple to find, so just make sure that you don't get stomped on by the furnace golem on the way towards it. Here's another one that's both in plain sight and also next to a Site of Grace. Head through the massive stone archway towards Belurat Tower settlement and you'll find the fragment at the top of the stairs that lead towards the settlement, right next to another one of Mikla's crosses. While this next fragment is easy to grab, it's also easy to miss, because now you'll need to double back on yourself and head south along the path that runs across the top of the cliff at the bottom of the stairs that you found the last fragment on. That will make more sense if you watch this footage carefully, I promise. That path eventually leads to Prospect Town, but before you explore in there, keep to the right hand side of the area until you reach this graveyard, where you'll find another pot shadow to kill. Fast travel back to 3-path cross now and then head northeast and across the bridge that leads to Castle Ensis. You'll know you're in the right place if, when you're crossing it, someone tries to put a gigantic ballista bolt or two inside of you. Anyway, once you're past that, keep an eye on the right hand side of the path and you should soon see a statue with a Scadutree fragment at its base. For the final fragment on Gravesite Plain, activate the Castle Front Site of Grace and then head east, following the path to the left as the route starts to split, and follow it along as it starts moving south. This will eventually lead you to the Pillar Path Cross Site of Grace, which also contains another of Mikla's crosses and the 8th Scadutree Fragment. Next up, we're going to go inside Belurat Tower Settlement for its single fragment. So fast travel back to that site of grace and then work your way through the settlement, past the small private altar site of grace, and then keep exploring until you reach this doorway that's guarded by a bunch of horrible little mini spider scorpions. Just before that doorway is a big pile of rubble that you can climb on, so do that and then follow the path into a building and you'll eventually reach a room with another cross and a Scadutree Fragment inside. Once again, there is only one fragment in Castle Ensis here, and it's impossible to miss as it's right next to one of Miquella's crosses. Just head up the path from the bridge towards the castle and you'll soon see this locked gate atop some stairs. Hang a left there and you'll be able to grab the fragment, touch the cross and activate another site of grace. Aren't you lucky? Once you've defeated the boss of Castle Ensis, you'll emerge onto Scadu Altus, and one of the first things that you'll see is one of Miquella's crosses standing next to a couple of NPCs. So head on over there and suck up fragment number 11 as quickly as you can. Careful of the big red boy on the road as you head towards Highroad encampment for the next fragment. You'll find it at the base of a statue on the right hand side of the path as soon as you enter, so it's easy to find as long as you can avoid being burnt to death. Directly to the west of that spot lies a building called the Church of the Crusade, which is your next stop, and the location of two, count 'em, fragments. You'll need to defeat an invading NPC first, but once you've done that, you'll find your prize at the base of the statue at the back of the church. Fast travel back to the Highroad Cross site of grace and head north until the path splits. Then follow it to the right and down to the south where you'll eventually find a camp on the right hand side of the road. Enter this camp and you'll find the 15th fragment at the foot of the statue in the centre. It's a short hop east from there to the next fragment, so just cross the road and you should spot another one of Miquella's crosses in the distance, next to an NPC and that all-important fragment. Easy! Activate the Moorth Ruins Cross site of grace by that last fragment, and then travel north quickly to find a small lake with a cave at the back of it. In the mouth of that cave is a statue of Marika that has a fragment at its base. Remember this location though, as we'll need to return to it a bit later on to grab a piece of the map and another fragment. Fast travel back to the Moorth Ruins Cross site of grace and then head southeast, taking care not to fall into any holes as you go, and you'll soon find this pot shadow on a ledge overlooking the ruins. As I had tourism mode on, this was a nice easy one to grab, but be warned, this pot shadow is actually guarded by a curse blade, which will attack as soon as you try to grab the fragment. It's a bit of a mission to grab this next fragment, and there's also a dragon to avoid, but as long as you stick to the left hand side of the cliff edge as you head south from the last fragment, you will be fine. Once you reach the cliff with the dragon in front of it, you should notice a spirit spring close by. This is locked at the moment, so continue heading left along the cliff edge and smash the seal at the end of the path before heading back to the newly opened spirit spring and use it to jump upwards. At the top of this cliff, you can follow a short path to another of Miquella's crosses and the 19th fragment. The next place to head to then is Shadow Keep, the incredibly large legacy dungeon that looms over Scadu Altus, and there are actually 2 ways into it, which makes this whole section of fragments fairly time consuming to gather. Except for the first 2, I guess. They're really easy as they're just through that front door, up the entrance elevator, and then they're dropped by this angry golden hippopotamus at the top once you've kicked its ass. Hippopotamus ass? From that location, fast travel back to the Moorth Ruins and head down the hole in the ground and follow the path through Bonnie Village and back up north until you find the big tunnel that leads into the church district of Shadow Keep. It's a long, winding route, and once you're there, you're going to be face to face with a lot of tricky jumps as you make your way along the rooftops of the flooded courtyard. Once you've done that and finally made it into the Sunken chapel, you'll soon spot the next fragment on the arm of this statue here, that you can then reach by doing a pixel-perfect jump and landing on its hand. If you can wait a bit though, this fragment is actually easier to grab if you first drain the water in the area. That way you won't drown if you mistime your jump, and you'll land fairly close to a lift that will bring you straight back up to the correct floor so that you can try that jump all over again. There are 2 ways to reach the next fragment, which is found next to the 4th floor cross site of grace in the specimen storehouse of Shadow Keep. From the Sunken Chapel statue, you can enter the castle tower at the base and go up a long elevator until you reach the specimen storehouse. From here you can jump straight off and go the route that you'd normally take if you had followed the path to the storehouse from the Hippo fight area. Just work your way upwards, climbing over the huge statues as you go until you drop off the top of one of them and land in front of the site of grace. Or instead of jumping off the ledge, you can also climb up this very long ladder here, and then at the top work your way down slightly to reach the site of grace. You'll know you're in the right place when you find a path outside of the tower that leads to all these burning boats. Follow that path around and soon you'll find the 4th floor cross site of grace and all the other trappings that come with it. Continue your climb upwards and you'll find the next fragment just in front of the door you open to reach the Mesmer boss fight. It's a good idea to pop up the stairs and activate the Dark Chamber site of grace after grabbing that fragment, as that can be found just in front of the boss arena where you face Mesmer, and you want to fast travel back to this one once you're ready to fight the Impaler inside. The final fragment in Shadow Keep is at the very bottom of the building, but in typical Elden Ring style, to get there, you first need to climb right to the top of the specimen storehouse. Once you reach the storehouse's loft, you'll be able to exit out of a doorway and onto a rickety old wooden walkway, which you can then follow around until you reach a lift. Ride this one down to the bottom and again follow the path until you reach another lift and ride that one down as well. At the base of this lift, you'll find the Shadow Keep back gate site of grace, and to the right of that, a room with the next fragment lying at the back of it. Just outside of the Shadow Keep back gate site of grace is an incredibly tricky boss fight against Commander Gaius and his very fast mount. But he's totally worth tackling because if you can take him down, you will gain access to the Scadutree Chalice at the north end of the map. Sitting at the base of the chalice are 5 Scadutree Fragments, which is an amazing haul, so just head on up there once the fight is done and get to gathering. These next 3 fragments can only be reached by taking a secret passage from the base of Shadowkeep to the Recluses River below. So it's best to do this once you've cleared the specimen storehouse of fragments first. What you need to do then is head to the front of the storehouse and go past the entrance stairs towards these burning boats. On the left by the wall, you'll soon notice a corpse next to a ladder, so head down that and then underneath the waterfall to find this ladder. Follow that ladder all the way down and there will be a room at the bottom with a painting in it, which looks like a dead end until you hit this wall here. Then just follow the path until you reach a coffin that you can rest in, and after a short cutscene, you'll wake up by the Castle Watering Hole Site of Grace. To the south of that site is a big waterfall and the path towards the Abyssal Woods. So follow the cliff edges all the way down to the water, but then double back on yourself and go to the base of that big waterfall to find the 31st fragment lying in an open coffin. You'll need to do a bit of parkouring over tombstones in order to continue following the river downwards, but once you reach the area at the bottom here with a collection of lakes, you'll find 2 hungry hippos that will drop a fragment each upon defeating. So get smacking, Tarnished, because these 2 fragments are better than no fragments. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be looking at this guide. You've got a hard path ahead of you for these next 3 fragments because, in order to get to the Abyssal Woods, you're going to need to head down a level from the Hippo fight and make your way through the dark catacombs below. Bring a torch with you because this is a massive pitch-black dungeon with a boss fight at the very end, but once you're through that, you'll arrive in the Abyssal Woods, a place that's so scary your steed will just refuse to be summoned while you're there. Once in the woods, head southeast as fast as you can, only stopping to activate the woodland Site of Grace as you pass it, and make your way to the map marker icon that can be just about seen in the greyed out portion of your map. You'll find that map piece right in front of the abandoned church here, and inside that church, well, there are 2 juicy fragments. Fast travel back to the woodland Site of Grace now, and then head west until you find the Abyssal Woods Site of Grace. From that Site of Grace, head due north, past the giant rats and into this cliff-lined clearing, where, amongst the wizards, you'll find the next fragment on the back of a corpse lying at the base of this tree. You're going to need to head to the Cerulean coast for these next few fragments, which is a beautiful area that can be found by following the long path and then jump-filled river down south from the castle front Site of Grace. You'll know you're on the right track if you pass a Site of Grace called Elak River downstream. So if you find that, keep heading south and hug the right-hand wall until you go through some trees and then get confronted by this amazing sight. Currently, this area will be greyed off on your map, so once you activate the nearby Site of Grace, head directly south, dodge the dragon if you can, and you'll be able to grab that map piece and then continue south until you reach the Cerulean Coast Cross Site of Grace on the cliff edge here. Which, incidentally, is where you'll find the next fragment. From there, head north and follow the coastline until you reach the Cerulean Coast West Site of Grace. The fragment close by is quite hard to spot as it's in a very small, very dark cave. But if you go left just after the big ruins and then head through this crack in the mountain and follow it around to the left, you should soon spot a small cave entrance on the right-hand side that holds both the fragment and an angry demi-human chief. So watch out for that thing. Fast travel back to the Cerulean coast, cross from there and head west towards that big outcrop you can see in the distance. Get all the way to the tip of that and you'll find the entrance to Stone Coffin Fissure in the middle of this big hole. It's a fair way down and the climb is hampered by lots of slimes, but once you reach the bottom, just keep following the path and you'll soon reach the Fissure Cross Site of Grace, with the standard cross and fragment sitting next to it. These next two fragments are once more in optional areas that take a bit of work to get to. First, you need to unlock the Dragon's Pit Terminus Site of Grace, which can be reached by going through the Dragon's Pit Tunnel that's found south of the Castle Front Site of Grace. Make your way through that tunnel by solving the puzzle within, and when you emerge, you'll find the Dragon's Pit Terminus Site of Grace at the foot of the jagged peak. From here you have two directions to choose from, but if you follow this path north and around, you'll end up scaling Jagged Peak, and somewhere near the top, at the place where rolling boulders start spawning, you'll find the next fragment sitting on the floor in front of the cliff edge. Next up, head along this route south from the Dragon's Pit Terminus Site of Grace towards the bright red flowers of Charo's hidden grave. You'll need to cross over the top of the corpse of a gigantic dead dragon to get there, but keep following the path as it curls upwards towards the north and you'll soon reach this body of water with a hippo on it. Give that hippo a good spanking and the next fragment will be all yours. Remember that cave location that I told you to remember by the lake just north of the Moorth Ruins Cross Site of Grace? Well, you need to go back there now to get not only the next fragment, but also the map piece that will uncover the final section of the map. So, journey through that cave until you emerge by the Ancient Ruins Base Site of Grace, and then head southwest past some very angry fire golems until you reach the entrance to the Temple Town Ruins area. Just before you get there, you'll see the map marker statue on the right-hand side of the path, so grab that map piece and then head into the ruins. On the south side of the ruins is a little hole in the wall that you can use to gain entrance, but I didn't find that while I was capturing this footage, so instead I just jumped over the walls on my steed, which, to be honest with you, is way harder than going through that little hole, so don't do what I did, go through the hole. Anyway, up here, overlooking the courtyard below, is a dead body with a fragment on it. Yoink! Now we need to head into the ancient ruins proper, and to do that we'll need to travel down this lift that's found on the first floor of the Specimen Storehouse building. Ride that lift down, make your way through a few rooms full of these absolutely minging living jars without their jars on, and you'll eventually end up here, at the West Rampart Site of Grace. Before doing this though, it might also be a good time to fight Mesmer at the Dark Chamber Site of Grace, if you haven't done so already, as 1, you'll need to do this in order to complete the game, and 2, with 42 Scadutree Fragments in your pocket, you should actually be pretty tough by now. Anyway, whatever you decide to do, get across the bridge that leads towards the ruins and activate the Site of Grace at the entrance to the area. Then head left out of the door, go down this short lift, and then follow the path to another fragment hoarding hippo. Travel back to the ancient ruins Site of Grace after doing that, and this time go right out of the door and follow the path all the way along, and at the end of it enter the ruins. It's quite labyrinthine inside here and things can get proper confusing because everything looks similar, but keep making your way down until you finally emerge in front of the Rao Ancient Ruins Cross, the Site of Grace, and the ever important fragment. From this site of grace, double back on yourself and ride through the ruins the way you came, past that first Spirit Spring jump there and towards the second one behind it. Jump up this one, and just at the top here should be another fragment hoarding pot shadow for you to smash. Travel back to the Ancient Ruins Cross site now and cross the bridge that's guarded by the Furnace Golem. You can just ignore this golem and continue following the path to the west until you reach the Rao Ancient Ruins West site of grace. Just in front of that is another entrance to some ruins, so go inside there, head up these stairs, and you'll find the final fragment of this area resting against this wall in the big room full of pillars. The last 4 fragments can be found in the final area of the DLC, Enir Ilum, which can easily be reached by following the path upwards from the last fragment. Well, that and also by beating a boss and Mesmer too, I guess, but I'll leave you to work out how to do those things. Once you've reached Enir Ilum, follow the main path and you'll soon reach the Spiral Rise Cross site of grace here, which has, you guessed it, a Miquella's Cross and a fragment next to it. Okay, this fragment is by far the hardest to get in the game as it involves a lot of dangerous jumping. Head back the way you came from the Spiral Rise Cross site of grace until you reach this bit here where the priest is kneeling on the stairs. Then go right and down this staircase. This is where the jumping begins and it's kind of hard to explain, so just follow where I go in the video and hopefully you can make it to the fragment at the end of it in one piece. Just watch out for that bit where you have to jump through a window. It's bloody nightmarish. Okay, once again, go back to the Spiral Rise Cross Site of Grace, and this time head on upwards and out onto the rooftops with all the gravebirds. Make your way along those and then back up into the tower and continue up the stairs until you reach this little room with an altar and a fragment inside. And here it is, the 50th and final Scadutree Fragment in Shadow of the Erdtree. This one is on the main path to the final boss, so just keep going, and once you've grabbed it, rest at the fire and fill yourself with beautiful boosts before heading off for the final confrontation. And that is all 50 fragments gone and gotten. Thanks to you all for watching, and to the guides team at Eurogamer and RPS for a lot of helpful information. I've included links to their guides in the description below. If you found this video useful, do give it a like, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games, and of course, do enjoy your time in the Lands of Shadow. Goodbye!